Welcome to my presentation on alcohol abuse. Today's presentation will focus on alcohol abuse in college-age students. Welcome to my presentation on alcohol. 60% of college-age students 18 to 22 years of age drink alcohol. Approximately 2 out of every 3 college students reportedly participate in binge drinking. And approximately 2,000 college students aged 18 to 24 die each year related to unintentional alcohol-related injuries. 60% of college There are many consequences associated with alcohol abuse among this population. The most common are inability to maintain relationships, decreased concentration, performing poorly in classes, risk of injury, impaired judgment resulting in being a victim of assault or committing a crime, and then there are long-term effects as well that can result in chronic pancreatitis, liver disease, kidney disease, and high blood pressure. The populations most at risk for developing alcohol abuse, aside from college-age students, are children who have a family history of alcohol abuse, adolescents, males, the elderly, and children who have been introduced to alcohol before the age of 14. Risk factors for developing behaviors such as alcohol abuse include low self-efficacy, your environment, so who you hang out with, who's in your social circle, who's influencing you, your attitude toward the specific behavior, whether or not you think it's acceptable, your socioeconomic status. So statistics say that the lower the socioeconomic status, the higher risk you are for developing any type of addictive behavior. What are the subjective norms in your environment, and psychological and individual factors? So now let's explore the social cognitive theory and how it's associated with risk factors. So according to the social cognitive theory, social environment, personal characteristics of the individual, and behavior all interact with one another to form a viewpoint on a behavior. In this case, we're discussing alcohol abuse. The social cognitive theory focuses on 5 viewpoints to focus in on to change a behavior. The first thing being knowledge. So what do I know about alcohol abuse? Does it seem risky, or is it safe? The next item is perceived self-efficacy. So if I were to develop a problem with alcohol, can I control it? Or am I able to avoid that behavior altogether? These are feelings that a person has in themselves to be able to conquer a certain behavior. Outcome expectations. This is avoiding excessive alcohol use beneficial for me? The next one is goal formation, which, that would be like, what are the steps needed to succeed in avoiding the behavior? And then finally, there are socio-structural factors. So how does the community help decrease the risky behavior? Now let's explore how the social cognitive theory applies to alcohol abuse. So how can the social cognitive theory help me? Well, once determining the knowledge base of an individual, it's important to determine their strengths and weaknesses. If an individual is determined to have low self-efficacy, but they have a desire to avoid the risky behavior, the goal would be to build on the desire to avoid the behavior and increase the self-efficacy. In turn, health-promoting behaviors and interventions can be customized to the individual, and that is the goal of the SCT theory. It's goal-oriented, it targets the risk factors, and then it builds interventions around it to help that individual overcome the behavior. The next theory that I would like to discuss that relates to alcohol abuse is the trans-theoretical model of change. And here's how it relates to risk factors. So the trans-theoretical model of change has 5 stages that an individual goes through in order to adopt a new behavior. An individual may move through these stages and then take steps back and then go forward again. It can go back and forth in these stages. But this model focuses on the individual's mindset in order to put tasks and goals in place for the individual. Here are the 5 stages. The first one is pre-contemplation, which means an individual has no intention to take action in the foreseeable future. So they have not recognized that they have a potential problem. The contemplation stage, this is deciding whether or not to eliminate a health risk behavior. And then preparation, which is the intention to adopt a new behavior within a month. So now we've recognized we have an issue, we know we want to make change, and the goal would be to start in 30 days. And then we're going to take action. And these are modifications are made within the lifestyle. So now I've recognized my problem areas, what I might need to change, and here's how I'm going to change it. And then maintenance. This is considered maintenance when you can maintain that health behavior for at least 6 months. The goal of TCM is that it focuses on modifiable and non-modifiable personal aspects. So we're looking at our environment, our individual factors, and our genetic factors. Genetic being things that we obviously can't change. We may be born with more of a tendency to have an addictive behavior. We're looking at our social norms, which can affect a person's ability to choose a health behavior. So we also really always look at our peers to see what they are doing and what's accepted. That can influence our actions. But TCM targets the specific behavior, it implements an appropriate intervention for the behavior, and then this model is effective across a wide range of populations. Protective factors are characteristics that decrease a person's vulnerability to develop an unhealthy behavior. So we really have to look at having a high level of self-efficacy, meaning we know we can take on this task. What kind of stress do we have in our lives, whether personal or environmental? Take a look at our environment, who we surround ourselves with, who's in our social circle, our psychological function, our self-awareness, and our self-regulation behavior. So looking at the capability of being able to change these factors in ourselves to make ourselves stronger. So when applying the protection motivation theory to the protective factors, we're going to focus on that fear appeal to lead to cognitive assessments that end up with the behavior change. So how can we increase our self-efficacy, and what can we do to our environment to help ourselves so that we don't choose that maladaptive behavior? We're going to look at the costs and benefits, and then we want this to result in the threat appraisal or the coping appraisal. So basically, either how can I be protected from harm, and what do I need to focus on as far as the severity and vulnerability of my situation? So applying the PMT to the protective factors, we have to begin with the message to instill the fear. And then we really want to focus on building those factors like our self-integrity to make us stronger to be able to adapt to the new behavior. And all the while, the goal is to result in the self-affirmation to adopt these behaviors. And then again, we always look at our net gain. Looking at the extended parallel process model and how it relates to the protective factors, it states that an individual will either accept or reject the fear-arousing message. So the message components are going to contain the self-efficacy, the response efficacy, the susceptibility, and the severity. And the goal is to result in the perceived efficacy and perceived threat, protection motivation, message acceptance, and then the danger control process or the fear control process. The goal of applying the EPPM model is to have two things in there, your self-efficacy and your self-integrity. Without these two variables, the desired result is less likely to occur. So you have to have your values and your belief that you can accomplish something. This includes expected net gain as well, so analyzing your benefits and weighing your pros and cons, and this will result in the danger control response, which is message acceptance, to then begin the new behavior. Focusing on the social cognitive theory and how it relates to interventions, the SCT theory predicates that the social environment is essential influence on behavior. So in a study completed by Haidari and et al., in a study of 60 participants, 30 in a control group, 30 in a test group, proved that the SCT is effective in helping people recover from their addiction. They completed an educational needs assessment and gave information on addiction, treatment, and complications. Health risks were discussed. This enhanced their social self-efficacy. Decision-making skills were reviewed along with their competency, and the results were that their self-efficacy was increased in both the control and test group, and this increased their self-confidence, which is correlated with increased rates of recovering from addiction. Now we are going to look at the trans-theoretical model and interventions, and the TCM focuses on the stages of change and puts individualized interventions based on which stage you are in. The Pro-Change Behavior System in 2010 had a program that was developed to give people access to counseling via web-based programs. This is cost-effective. It ended up being that there was a reported self-efficacy increase by 26%. The meta-analysis of 57 studies revealed an increased success rate by treating people with a stage-match behavior intervention. One thing about this web-based program is that they can help individuals 24 hours a day just through something simple like your phone. So using something like this can help target interventions. Looking at the protection motivation theory and how it can relate to interventions, there are some different aspects that it focuses on. So there were some success noted with programs providing education on drug misuse and prevention in adolescents. We are looking to identify predictors of drug use. So do you have any internal or external factors that will increase your risk for excessive alcohol use? So in this case, they look at the intrinsic, which could be, are you just bored? That's if you interview people who are talking about if they use drugs or alcohol, a lot of the times you'll hear, well, I didn't have anything else to do. And what's their emotional self-regulation and what's their values? When you look at extrinsic factors, That can include, your social circle. So social acceptance and curiosity. Some people may be a little bit curious, but when they have that crowd around them that's encouraging the bad behavior, they're more likely to act on it as well. So the threat appraisal outcome shows effective with adolescents. So looking at the extended parallel process model and how it applies to interventions, the goal of the EPPM is to see how individuals respond to fear-arousing communications. So in a study completed by Garlapur and his team, they evaluated the effects of education using the EPPM to decrease cigarette smoking among adolescents. So background information was gathered, such as their age, gender, are they a current or previous smoker. Evaluation of perceived susceptibility, whether high or low. Education was then provided regarding the risks and harms that cigarettes can cause. Coping mechanisms were then provided to prevent use, and the results were that students reported a lower perceived susceptibility, meaning that they're not going to take on this bad behavior once they receive the education and coping mechanisms. The theoretical constructs that I felt were the most important and related to alcohol abuse were increasing self-efficacy, that was number one. Fear appeal, so having that message coming across. Theoretical staging for appropriate behavioral interventions, evaluating their cost and benefits as to whether or not is adapting this new behavior worth it, building your self-reliance, looking at your socio-structural factors, having goals, and staying accountable for your actions. Thank you everyone for watching this presentation. I look forward